We have had some bombshells come out about Blake Lively, and we saw that little clip that brought out where Blake is biting Justin Baldoni's lip. What's great about it is that it's coming from people who know what was happening directly on set, and that she was an unreliable narrator who frequently lied and manipulated situations on set.
Blake Lively just had a devastating courtroom meltdown after Justin Baldoni exposed her disgusting on-set behavior. And this time, it's not just rumors, it's raw footage.
Well, it's going to completely destroy her in court. They allege that there was significant behind-the-scenes turmoil involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni.
Yup. Blake allegedly tried to force a drunken flirt fest on Baldoni, and now the man dropped the receipts right on the judge's desk.
That Justin and Wayfair Studios have mountains of evidence.
And honestly, for months, he stayed in the background, letting his lawyers do the talking while Blake Lively and her team painted him as the villain. But when her attorney publicly accused him of fabricating evidence and manipulating the narrative, that silence broke. Justin didn't respond with a statement. He responded with something far more damning: a USB drive handed directly to the judge.
Now, I'm not going to play her video.
And what was on it? Footage that Blake Lively had likely prayed would never see the light of day. According to court insiders, this USB is now the most talked about piece of evidence in the entire case. It reportedly contains raw, unedited clips captured during and after production, footage that Wayfarer Studios had quietly recorded, knowing early on that something wasn't right with Blake's behavior on set.
And the footage, it also shows her being argumentative, condescending to people, like I said, inappropriate, contradicting her claims of harassment, that there was no harassment at all. And early on, Jamie Heath and Justin Baldoni saw that Blake was going to be a problem.
But the most explosive part isn't from the set. It comes from a private moment at a bar after a particularly tense shooting day. Several cast and crew were present, and security cameras were running.
No one believes that any sexual harassment happened. In fact, it would probably be the opposite way, where Blake was probably the one trying to harass others.
In that corner of the venue, Blake Lively, visibly intoxicated, approaches Baldoni and begins making physical advances. When he turns away, she tries again, more aggressively this time. That's when Baldoni physically pushes her back. That alone already flips the entire narrative upside down.
And we saw that little clip that brought out where Blake is biting Justin Baldoni's lip.
But it doesn't stop there. In the same footage, Blake is seen falling to her knees, sobbing and begging. What she's saying isn't entirely audible, but the body language is undeniable: desperate, erratic, manipulative.
So she says that Blake was described by this person as a malignant narcissist, and that she was an unreliable narrator who frequently lied and manipulated situations on set.
It's the kind of breakdown that reveals everything beneath the surface. This is not a woman being victimized. This is someone who is spiraling, and it's all on tape.
On set, making work very challenging for everyone, and it is very difficult to work with her.
And the real twist? This is the very footage Justin Baldoni tried to keep out of public view. From the start, he wanted to protect Blake's dignity, even after she falsely accused him of misconduct. He never intended to weaponize this material, but after being accused of lying and manufacturing fake evidence, he had no choice. The truth had to come out.
But now we have an insider who is confirming all of these different things.
Now that the footage has been shown in private court review, the tone has shifted. Blake's credibility is hanging by a thread. The court no longer sees this as a simple he said, she said case. The USB reveals what words could not.
And I want to say this. We were all trying to figure out, we all believe that Blake is a narcissist, right? But we weren't sure. There's different types of narcissists. There's different classifications. You could be mid-range. You could be, it goes on and on.
It proves that Justin Baldoni was not only telling the truth, he was actively trying to protect someone who was tearing his career apart. He lost money and public trust, yet he still hesitated to fight back with force. But with the release of this footage, the illusion is shattered. The courtroom has seen Blake not as a victim, but as a manipulator caught in the act.
but they describe her specifically as malignant narcissist. Now, here's the definition of a malignant narcissist, and you tell me if this sounds like Blake Lively. So, it is a term used to describe individuals exhibiting a combination of narcissistic traits such as grandiose sense of self, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy, along with more aggressive, manipulative, and abusive behaviors.
This is no longer about legal strategy or PR spin. This is about a pattern of behavior captured on tape, footage that Justin Baldoni never wanted to use, but had to. And now, it's the smoking gun. Not just because of what it shows, but because of what it confirms. That Blake Lively crossed every line, and that the only person who stayed quiet for too long was the one telling the truth. Blake Lively wasn't just difficult. She was chaos in designer heels.
Now, this source also claims that she was very unprofessional, often arriving late, even hours late, calling in sick, changing lines, costumes, and causing the budget overruns, which we all knew.
According to a key insider who worked directly on the set of It Ends With Us, Blake was labeled a malignant narcissist. Not your standard diva who needs a better trailer or throws the occasional tantrum. This was something deeper, darker, and far more damaging.
Getting into the details of this, I want to just go over this quickly, then we'll hop back into the report. But it says arrogance and self-centeredness. They have an inflated sense of their own importance and are preoccupied with their own needs and desires, often disregarding the feelings of others.
The term wasn't thrown around lightly. The source specifically described her as someone who manipulated, deceived, and dominated everyone in her orbit, often through subtle sabotage and psychological games. It wasn't just bad behavior. It was behavior that disrupted the entire ecosystem of the film's production.
That Blake attempted to take creative control of the entire film, and that she was undermining Justin's direction by stopping scenes and trying to redirect him.
Reports from the production team stated that Blake frequently showed up hours late or simply didn't show up at all, citing vague illnesses. On multiple occasions between May and July 2020, documented in internal production notes she never expected would leak, Blake claimed to be too sick to shoot, only to be seen hours later posting from brunch on Instagram or laughing with Ryan Reynolds in a behind-the-scenes clip she forgot to delete.
She also was rewriting the script over and over, trying to get her version in there, and she was insisting that they use her edits.
Her delays caused the production team to reschedule scenes at the last minute, often at double the cost. Entire shooting blocks were wasted because the lead actress was allegedly recovering from flu-like symptoms that no one ever witnessed.
This person, we've had these reports, which Katie points out. We had this report back in August, I want to say. It was on Reddit, where a person who was I think their neighbor was on the set, was part of the production crew, and had told them some of these things about Blake previously. They had put this in a Reddit thing anonymously.
One assistant director, speaking on the condition of anonymity to Without a Crystal Ball's Katie Joy, described a particularly damning day and Blake showed up 5 hours late, complained about the lighting, then demanded her costume be changed on the spot.
Back in August, when the movie was coming out, people were just upset with Blake's clothes, her age. She was way older than Lily, like almost 20 years older than what Lily should have been in the movie. And we saw how ridiculous her outfits are. I mean,
the original wardrobe, chosen weeks in advance by the design team to align with Lily Bloom's character arc, was deemed too juvenile by Blake, despite having signed off on it during pre-production.
She famously took over the film and wanted to do her own edit. Now, her cut of the film was reportedly unwatchable. Not just bad, but you could not watch it. And it scored really badly during the screenings.
She insisted on something she personally brought from home, which clashed so badly with the scene that post-production later had to digitally alter her outfit in select shots just to maintain continuity. The cost of this change? Approximately $18,000, according to Wayfarer Studios' production expense log from that week.
And if you think about it, if you've watched the movie, the music is just like the costumes, the look of it. And none of it really gelled. And even the music didn't gel.
This wasn't a one-time incident. Costume changes became a recurring nightmare. Blake reportedly rejected over a dozen approved wardrobe selections, many of which had already been tailored.
Pop music in particular, which doesn't really vibe well with the serious nature that this movie was supposed to be.
Each last-minute change required urgent alterations, rewrites for scene continuity, and additional labor hours, racking up unexpected charges the studio hadn't budgeted for. By mid-July, Wayfarer's budget had ballooned by nearly $320,000, a figure confirmed in a now public budget variance sheet leaked during court proceedings.
If it was his original music that he wanted in there, how much better this film would have been. But again, this is part of what I'm thinking, that she lied on Taylor, and that's why Taylor keeps putting that information out there. Like, I had no part of this other than they licensed my music.
The ripple effect on morale was brutal. Crew members began rotating out or requesting to be reassigned to different departments. Several emails, submitted as part of Brian Freriedman's court filings, included subject lines like, "Urgent, can't work with Blake another day," and "Need transfer, hostile set, environment."
Now, this source also claimed that Blake threatened to accuse Justin of sexual harassment and to go to the New York Times if Sony didn't grant her demands. We've heard about this.
In one email dated July 2nd, a makeup artist outlined how Blake yelled at her for not blending the blush like Serena Vander Woodson would, referencing her Gossip Girl role, not the character she was actually portraying. The artist's resignation letter followed 3 days later. The psychological strain was compounded by how Blake operated on set. Multiple production insiders revealed that Blake often refused to take direction from Justin Baldoni, sometimes walking off in the middle of scenes to rethink the script, as she called it.
Where they are showing, Blake having her tantrum, saying crazy stuff to people, taking over the movie, doing ridiculous things. And also, you will be able to see and we saw that little clip that brought out where Blake is biting Justin Baldoni's lip.
There were multiple instances where, while cameras were rolling, Blake interrupted Baldoni mid-scene with the words, "That's not how Lily would say it," and proceeded to deliver an improvised monologue, often contradicting the emotional pacing Justin had carefully mapped out. These interruptions weren't just creative disagreements, they were power plays.
That's just a small little clip they have of all the behind the scenes of what Blake was doing, and it goes directly against this narrative that she's been trying to spin, that she was sexually harassed. And once that comes out, well, it's going to completely destroy her in court.
During a shooting day logged on June 22nd, Blake halted a scene by loudly declaring, "No one gets this character like I do." She then called for a break, despite being behind schedule. According to the second AD's daily production report, the scene took 4 additional hours to complete because Blake rewrote her own dialogue on set and demanded that Justin adjust his reactions to her new lines in real time. Not only did this add extra takes and spike labor costs for overtime, but it also caused the cinematography team to reblock the entire sequence to match Blake's version.
And so when it comes to different films where they were representing Justin, I don't know if they're representing all of Wayfair, but this film, when they represent kind of like the main people in a film, they want to bring up in other talent that's part of WME.
Perhaps the most telling moment came during a confrontation in early August, recounted by 2 assistant producers in sworn depositions. Blake reportedly stormed into the Video Village tent and told Justin, "You're just here to push buttons. I'm the real voice of this movie." The altercation was captured in part on an iPhone recording by one of the producers, which is now part of the sealed court evidence package labeled Incident Compilation C. The footage reportedly shows Justin remaining composed, while Blake gestures aggressively and raises her voice loud enough to halt production across the lot.
Like, you just can't they don't want you to go and pick an actress who is represented by, I think it's CAA or another agency. They want it to be in-house with somebody else from WME. So they brought on Blake to this project, to It Ends With Us.
This pattern of behavior wasn't isolated to 1 or 2 bad days. It became the defining atmosphere of the set. Every schedule had to be padded. Every scene had a backup version. Every department was briefed to expect last-minute changes. Not because the story demanded them, but because Blake did. And she wasn't subtle. Crew members referred to her behind her back as Blake the Blender. Not because of makeup mishaps, but because she blended chaos into every scene she touched.
They had a video of him. They will show different people who are their clients in different arenas because they represent sports people, they represent models, they represent all over the place. So he was still on their website.
And still, through all of this, Justin Baldoni tried to keep the peace. He didn't call her out publicly. He didn't walk off the set. He absorbed the damage while documenting every moment quietly, knowing that one day he might need to defend himself against exactly what's playing out now. And now that those records have entered court review, every sick day, every costume swap, and every confrontation is no longer a rumor. It's evidence. And it came straight from the set she thought she controlled.
She has no leg to stand on as an actress for her own acclaim. So when Justin, he was represented by WME at the time, he did not want Blake Lively. Obviously, because her acting is horrible. She's known, she has a bad reputation. They actually cite this in their lawsuit that they were very hesitant and really didn't want Blake to be in this movie because, again, like I said, because of her behavior.
What was supposed to be a routine test screening for It Ends With Us turned into a studio-wide emergency. Sony executives were stunned when the version of the film shown to the audience bore little resemblance to what director Justin Baldoni had originally created. The pacing was erratic, the dialogue felt disjointed, and scenes that had previously landed with emotional weight now fell flat. Audience feedback was brutal. The phrase unwatchable appeared so many times in the written screening responses that it had to be tallied into a separate category. And there was one name tied to this disastrous version of the film: Blake Lively.
Back into the project, so after she did her edits, because it was unwatchable, it was unbearable to watch, Sony had to reincorporate Justin's edits back into Blake's edits in order to get any type of continuity or make it so that that people would want to watch it.
According to internal communications reviewed by Variety's editorial staff, during their late October reporting, this alternate edit wasn't just a minor deviation. Blake had completely restructured the film using her own editor, who was not approved by Sony or Wayfarer Studios. She made sweeping changes to entire character arcs, reworked the emotional beats, and cut multiple scenes that had been included in Justin's original vision.
Because the audience scores were that bad. Like, we heard they were bad, but it looks like they were just worse than we actually thought initially.
Her intent was clear. She wanted the film to reflect her version of Lily Bloom, stylized, romanticized, and in total contradiction with the source material's darker tones. The most glaring example was the removal of a pivotal silent montage scene at the halfway point, which critics in the internal memo called essential to the film's message about domestic trauma. In Blake's version, the sequence was replaced with a pop song and a long monologue she reportedly wrote herself.
Now, they reportedly pressured Sony to cave to her demands, all that she was doing, and this included overriding plans to show Justin's cut of the movie, his edit of the movie, at the Book Bonanza event.
Sony's post-screening analytics team sent a damage report on September 3rd to the head of marketing, describing the audience response as catastrophic. The Net Promoter Score, NPS, dipped into negative territory, an extremely rare metric in pre-release screenings.
At Book Bonanza, Sony had planned to show a clip of the movie to the audience, right? But it was going to be Justin's cut that they were going to use.
Audiences were reportedly confused by the tone, distracted by unnecessary monologues, and emotionally disengaged from Lily. The test group of 86 participants, pulled from New York and LA, gave the film an average rating of 2.1 out of 10, a score that studio insiders later confirmed was among the worst in recent Sony test screening history. The situation became worse when Sony executives realized that this unapproved cut was the one Blake had secretly delivered to the Book Bonanza event in Dallas on July 29, 2023.
Again, like I said, because of her behavior, her how she acts, how she looks, but then also her age. Her age was just, they aged her way up. Okay, they were forced to age her way up. They were thinking about aging up like a little bit, maybe mid-20s, but Blake is near 40. So, and she's a mother of 4.
According to an internal complaint filed by Wayfarer's VP of distribution, the agreement was to showcase a 7-minute teaser of Justin Baldoni's original edit, specifically Reel 2, which included the diner confrontation and the mother-daughter subplot. But Blake allegedly bypassed this directive by flying out with her own hard drive containing the full version of her re-edit. Without clearing it with Sony's legal or publicity departments, she had the full movie screened at the convention before an audience of 400.
She had just had a baby. She's not a good fit. She's not a good actress. And she has a terrible reputation in Hollywood for the things that she does, taking over films, being very difficult to work with, being manipulative. Look, the malignant narcissist traits, you know, we know Hollywood is full of narcissists, but when you get a bad reputation in Hollywood for being such a narcissist that other narcissists don't want to work with you, that's wild.
Witnesses at the event confirmed to Deadline that the version shown did not match the trailer Sony had just released the week prior. A fan named Carla Timmons posted on X, formerly Twitter, on the same night. "That movie we saw is not what they advertised. Whole vibe was off. Why was it so campy?" Another user shared screenshots from an attendee group chat saying, "Pretty sure Blake showed a different version. None of the stuff Justin teased on IG was in this cut."
So this is part of what they believe that WME forced him in order to bring Blake onto this project. And they did it because this was supposed to be her big comeback.
The aftermath triggered a flurry of internal emails, now part of court exhibits introduced by Brian Freriedman. On July 31st, Sony's marketing director emailed Wayfarer's executive team with the subject line, "Unauthorized screening, immediate response needed." The body of the message included the line, "This sets us back 4 months. All existing promotional materials are now misaligned. We cannot push this version forward." Another email, dated August 1st, from a senior Sony executive read, "We need to bring Justin's cut back, or we have no release."
Remember, she hadn't been making films in years. She had been, just having kids, and she was staying at home. But this was supposed to be her comeback.
What followed was a full-scale damage control operation. Sony had to halt all trailer placements, delay digital ads, and begin reshoots to undo some of the continuity issues caused by Blake's cut. Justin Baldoni was brought back in under urgency to reconstruct the film using his original direction and materials, but not all of it was salvageable. Multiple scenes had already been reshot per Blake's changes and couldn't be reversed without budget blowback. This forced the studio to develop a hybrid version, part Baldoni, part Lively, which insiders described as a Frankenstein cut stitched together to preserve whatever flow could be rescued. On August 15, 2020, Justin Baldoni submitted a detailed memo to Sony's production head outlining the differences between his original version and Blake's re-edit. The memo listed 36 changes that Blake's version had made without approval, including the removal of Lily's journal flashbacks, replacement of the orchestral score with pop tracks from her Spotify playlist, the rewriting of dialogue between Ryle and Lily in 3 critical scenes, a brand new voiceover recorded by Blake without Wayfarer's knowledge. Sony's legal department followed this memo by adding a clause to Blake's existing contract stating that she had overstepped her authority as a co-producer and had breached terms by independently modifying and screening unreleased content. This clause, now part of the civil filings, is titled Unauthorized Creative Control Interference. What made this stunt even more reckless was the fact that Blake Lively had 0 test audience approval for her version. Unlike the director's cut, which had gone through 3 structured internal feedback rounds between March and June 2023, her re-edit was never vetted. It bypassed legal, it bypassed marketing, and more dangerously, it bypassed any consideration for the film's social message. The original version was built around themes of abuse, healing, and silence. Blake's cut swapped that out for stylized aesthetics, romantic tension, and heavy-handed voiceovers that made Lily seem more like a fashion blogger than a trauma survivor.
But Blake snuck her cut in, like she, I guess, took it on the plane with her and brought it to Book Bonanza. And instead of playing just a clip of Justin's, or like they were supposed to, and instead of playing just a clip of maybe her cut, she ended up showing, I believe, the whole movie.
Sony executives found themselves cornered. With Blake's version now out in the public via Book Bonanza and social media chatter, they could no longer market the director's cut without creating confusion. Promotional posters, teasers, and premiere invites had to be redone. Deadlines for foreign release submissions were missed. One internal email from Sony's European division, sent on August 19th, reads, "Germany has pulled theatrical release until further notice. Marketing unclear on which version to print." Another country, Sweden, reportedly delayed its release by 10 weeks due to legal confusion over Blake's edit rights.
Justin was the one that was supposed to be going to Book Bonanza, but they ended up just having Blake and the other cast. And remember, Justin was excommunicated from any of the promotion and the promo and the interviews, all the things they were doing leading up to the actual film. And he's the director, and not just a director, one of the lead characters in the movie.
Justin Baldoni, who had remained silent about the creative sabotage, broke protocol by delivering a sealed folder of communications to Judge Lyman, which included time-stamped editing logs, production notes, and emails showing that Blake had bypassed all studio channels. The folder was labeled Unauthorized Recut Timeline, July 2020, and was submitted along with footage comparing both versions of the film. Sources inside the courtroom say the judge paused proceedings for 15 minutes just to privately review the contents of the comparison. And all of this came from one decision: Blake's decision to hijack her own movie and rewrite it in her own voice, with zero approval and no professional restraint. The results weren't just damaging. They dismantled a film that had already cost millions to produce and now needed just as much to repair.
So it just caused a lot of confusion at the time, but now we have absolute confirmation that this was part of Blake's little plan. Now, this insider also asserts that Justin and Wayfarer Studios have mountains of evidence.
Moreover, Blake Lively didn't just lie to the court. She dragged Taylor Swift's name into her mess to boost her credibility as a producer. In February 2024, Blake claimed in interviews that Taylor had demanded the original composer be fired from It Ends With Us, citing creative differences.
But they have to know her reputation. Everyone knows her reputation, they're saying. And so they knew that she would be this way on set. And so that, really, Jamie Heath, Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer really didn't stand a chance from the beginning.
By mid-March, it became clear that Taylor's camp was distancing itself. No public support. No comment on the growing blackmail allegations. In fact, Treepayne's office quietly let it slip to several reporters that Taylor hadn't spoken to Blake since October 2023. The silence was deliberate. And then came the real blow. On February 16th, Taylor Swift unfollowed Blake on Instagram. Gigi Hadid did the same. So did Avril Lavigne. Hollywood doesn't move without reason, and when Taylor unfollows, it's never random. Meanwhile, the raw footage submitted to the court from Wayfarer Studios revealed a very different Blake than the one described in her harassment complaint. One of the clips, labeled 7F, captured Blake walking up to Justin Baldoni and biting his lip during an unrehearsed moment. His reaction? Immediate discomfort. He backed off, signaled for a cut, and stepped away. Another clip, shot on July 15th, showed her yelling at a lighting technician for casting her in aging shadows. That tech quit the following day, citing verbal abuse.
They've worked with Justin at Wayfarer, so this person has worked at Wayfarer for years. And they said that Justin is amazing. Like him, Jamie Heath, all of Wayfarer, that the guys over there are really respectful. They're faithful family men. The way you see Justin in interviews or him giving a speech or his podcast, that is how he is. That's how Jamie Heath is.
This wasn't isolated chaos. Wayfarer's legal team confirmed that cameras were kept rolling even after cut was called for this exact reason. They knew Blake was volatile, and they documented everything. She rewrote her own lines, dismissed scheduled shot lists, and in one scene, grabbed the clapperboard from a PA and tried to run the set herself. Her claim that she was marginalized on set doesn't hold up against hours of footage showing the opposite. She was in control, unchecked, and intimidating everyone around her. Assistant producers Nina Delgado and Malik Reese provided internal memos confirming these patterns. Delgado's email from June 20th warned that Blake was taking over the shoot, making calls outside of her role, and directly undermining Baldoni in front of cast and crew. These documents now sit in sealed court records under Evidence Packet B, alongside the footage. None of this was meant to go public. Baldoni and Jamie Heath only released it when Blake's team escalated the legal war. Now, the narrative is no longer hers to control. It belongs to the footage, to the logs, to the records. So what do you think? Was Blake exposed by her own footage, or is there still more to this story we haven't seen yet? Drop your thoughts below, because this courtroom saga is far from over.